Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, culture than pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. It is draft week, and that means Dennis and I will be looking at the 2-round mock draft that he and Matt and myself worked on over the weekend, which is sure to be good for a laugh about 9 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. But until then, we have that and another big piece of news that dropped that impacted our mock draft efforts. But before we dive into all that, Dennis, how was your weekend?
You know, my weekend is good. It's starting to get cold again here. And like, I was just looking at the weather, man. I may have to turn the heat back on here in the studio. It's going to keep getting into the 40s. But, you know, I'm trying to race to get my lawn mowed. My mower's acting up. It's 45, 50 degrees out. It's all kinds of stuff going on. Top it off, wife and I both have chest colds, congestion. So if I go muting and looking like I'm hacking up a lung, it's because I am.
Yeah, I think the coughing's going around. I seem to have had like a sporadic cough for the last couple of years, and I know our friend Matt is dealing with that as well. So 'tis the season. You got 40s, we got 30s. Saturday, I don't think it cracked 33, and apparently we're either getting. This is what I love about the weather.
You're going to be that. Stop me.
Well, this is what I love about the weather here. Tomorrow night we're either getting
Ball in
2
the
inches.
top.
2 inches of rain or 8 inches of snow. So apparently those are my options, and they're not sure which we're going to get. Well, the first piece of news that we'll get to before the draft actually impacted our mock draft, and you will see some updated picks because guess what? The Jets finally managed to trade for Aaron Rodgers. Total details of the trade. They swapped first-round picks, so the Packers go to pick 13. The Jets go to pick 15. The Packers picked up a second-round pick and a sixth-round pick. They send Rodgers and a fifth-round pick. And then for 2024, they get a second-round pick that becomes a first-round pick if Rodgers plays more than 65% of the snaps. So, Dennis, are you glad it's over? Do you think Rodgers helps the Jets?
Well, I think Rodgers, that's, picks in the first round this year is kind of big. And, I was listening to Howard Bender and Jim Bowden on the way home from work, and they basically said, whoever the Packers wanted at 15 or 13 or the Jets, they're probably still going to get their guys. And interestingly enough, when we went back in and kind of took a look at our mock draft we were doing, we literally just switched teams and played one up 2 and the other one down because it was still a viable move. So that is more, I think, for the Jets to be able to say, if next year's pick, if it becomes moves up to a first round pick, the Packers can say, we got 2 first round picks, or I don't even remember who got which picks now.
Yeah, I'm just happy the trade's done and that Rodgers is where he's going to be, because we've seemingly known that's how it's going to play out for a while. I didn't think it was that big of a haul, honestly, for the Packers. We've seen some of these franchise quarterback trades that 3 first-round picks and some second-round picks and some players. Here, if you were really to boil it down, they switched positions in the first round, which is, it's not like they were very far apart. So that to me is a little bit of a wash. So essentially for this year, it's a 2nd and 6th round pick for Rodgers and a 5th round pick. And then next year they get either a 1st or a 2nd, so the maximum they get is maybe 1 first, 2 spots up, a 2nd and a 6th for giving up Rodgers, and a 5th. I think it's an indication both sides were just ready to do something different. And if Rodgers ends up playing at an elite level for 2 years, probably a good deal for the Jets. If he ends up looking a little bit like he did last year and retiring, maybe it wasn't a great deal for the Jets, but I don't know if they were going to make the playoffs with Zach Wilson.
I don't think so.
We're going to dive into our mock draft, and I'm going to put up the screen and go along. So the way we did our mock draft, we did 2-round NFL mock draft. I had actually projected the one trade that I had projected in there was the Packers. I thought they'd be able to get both of the Jets' 2nd-round picks, but who knew it wouldn't be that great. So you will see the trade reflected when we get to that point. What we did was the 3 of us alternated, each taking 3 picks at a time. Dennis, you got to kick it off. So why don't you tell us about the top 3 picks you made there?
Oh, silly season. It's lying season. There's back alley subterfuge going on. You can't believe what anybody is saying. I'm still team CJ Stroud. I think that he's as good as Bryce Young in just about everything. He's a pocket passer. He does have mobility. Does he use it as often as some people? No, it's easy to fall in love with the Anthony Richardson types. But he showed against Georgia, if he needs to be that guy, he can be that guy. He just chooses to make the throws because he's typically had the receivers. I went ahead and I took C.J. Stroud at the 101 to the Carolina Panthers. Their rebuild is afoot. They're going to take a big step this year. They've got their quarterback of the future, and I think he's going to fit in there. Next year they're going to need to go and get an alpha wide receiver. I don't think you can ride A.J. Thielen and Terrace Marshall Jr. too far. I don't think DJ Chark is the long-term answer at wide receiver. So they are going to have to do some work in that regard. But this year, given that they've got a decent offensive line, they'll have a good running game, and they've got a coach that knows how to work with young receivers. Despite the fact that Jim Irsay kept giving him old receivers, quarterbacks, not receivers. I like C.J. Stroud to the Panthers. There's been a lot of talk that Houston only has eyes for Bryce Young, and in this draft, it worked out that way. I also, because it is the lying season, I don't think that if Bryce Young goes number 1, I still think C.J. Stroud goes number 2. I think he's clearly better than Richardson, and he's better than Will Levis. And if Nick Caserio was to pass on one of these 2 quarterbacks and not take a quarterback at all this year, or take Will Levis at 12, to me, that would be that is such malfeasance. I don't know that I could bear watching it on TV. That would be just such a terrible thing. So I have Bryce Young going at number 2 to Houston. He'll team back up with his former college teammate John Mechie, and they'll get the ball rolling there in Houston as the rebuild is officially underway and the tanking is over. And then at 3, you did say we could project some trades, and honestly, because we were trying to get the draft done, and I didn't necessarily want to mess around with the mechanisms of trading. I went ahead and kept the Arizona Cardinals at 3. I went with Will Anderson, one of the top, if not the top defender coming out this year. He's going to slot right into the edge position in Arizona and immediately upgrade their defense and their pass rush. And, you know, nothing makes a mediocre cornerback tandem look good like an outstanding pass rush. And so there I went with Will Anderson, who was essentially the biggest need that Arizona has.
Yeah, and then next up was our friend Matt. You know, with the top 2 quarterbacks and Anderson off the board, a lot of speculation has been the Colts are going to be looking to a future quarterback. Some people have projected that to be Richardson. He went with Will Levis, thinking the Colts might go there, and then followed that up with the Seahawks taking Anthony Richardson. A lot of people think Richardson would benefit from sitting on the bench for a little bit with Geno Smith there on a multi-year deal. Seattle would have that kind of ability. And then his last pick was Detroit. With all the quarterbacks reasonably off the board, he goes with Jalen Carter, a very good defensive lineman. Do you have any qualms with the picks Matt made there?
The only time I had qualms with the picks was later in the first round and in the second round when I had Seattle's picks. And I'm like, oh, this would be a great time to take Hendon Hooker. And I'm like, oh, they took Anthony Richardson. No, I think it's to me, honestly, I think Richardson is the better prospect. Levis might be the better short-term play. But I would have probably went Richardson, and given Shane Steichen's history with Jalen Hurts, you know, you can, it's easy to make that connection with Richardson, but Levis has a lot of those tools as well. And so I don't necessarily have an issue with it. As a Detroit Lions fan, I love the Jalen Carter pick.
So I was up next, and with the 4 quarterbacks off the board, it kind of clarifies, you know, as we were moving into our second set of teams, or in my case, the first set. I went with what seems like a huge need for Las Vegas. They did not have a very good defense. They did not have a good pass defense. So I went with Christian Gonzalez, the corner there. For the Atlanta Falcons, it would make sense after spending a couple of high picks on offense the last few years. It's not like they couldn't use an offensive player, but I think they will probably start to look at that defense if they want to compete. So I go for the edge, Tyree Wilson. And then the Bears, you know, they have their quarterback. They've worked on building some offensive pieces. They still have needs all over the board, but I went with Pierce Skoronski, who is regarded kind of as the top tackle, because I think they need to invest in helping Justin Fields to stand up, helping the running game, helping in a lot of places. So, Dennis, any qualms with those picks?
No, I think that they all make a ton of sense.
All right, well, we'll move to your next 3, and you got the Eagles, Titans, and Texans.
So the defending Philadelphia Eagles, you know, they don't have a ton of needs, but, you know, they could look to bolster. They did lose a lot of defensive players. So let me rephrase that. They need to rebuild their defense after a lot of players. I think they had 8 of 11 defensive starters last year go into free agency. Now, they re-signed several of them, but that being said, that means they need to get younger on defense. And I went ahead and grabbed cornerback Joey Porter Jr. He's a little bit bigger cornerback. I think teaming up with a veteran like Darius Slay, and I forget who the other veteran they have there. I think they brought him back as well. But that's gonna help that Eagles defense sort of withstand.
It's James Bradbury.
Yeah.
You were testing my
Eagles
mind.
defense will be able to kind of withstand an onslaught of teams trying to knock the Eagles off. You know, let's face it, the Eagles have 17 Super Bowl games next year in the regular season. Everybody's coming for the champ. Up next was the Tennessee Titans. You know, their needs: offensive tackle, wide receiver, quarterback. You know, quarterbacks are off the board pretty much. It's tough to go there. Interior O-line. I went ahead with what I think is the best offensive tackle in the game coming into the league in Paris Johnson Jr. I like Skoronski a lot, but I think there's a chance he gets moved inside the guard. I think Paris Johnson is a really good left tackle. And, they let Taylor Lewan go. They let Jack Conklin go a couple years ago. Tennessee is going to need to keep an aging Ryan Tannehill upright while he develops rapport with Treylon Burks and Chigo Okonkwo, and also need to open up holes for Derrick Henry. Henry's going to still be the game there, regardless of the weekend trade to Philadelphia rumors that had everybody all abuzz. So Paris Johnson Jr. seems like a natural fit there in Tennessee. And then at 12, the Texans are back on the board. And again, it's, what are their needs really besides everything? Quarterback, wide receiver, edge, defensive line, interior O-line. So they took Bryce Young. Now at 12, I went ahead and added Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think he makes a lot of sense. He's the best receiver in the class. There's some talk about he doesn't have long speed. He's not a great outside receiver. He can play some outside receiver. He's big enough, 6'1", 200 pounds. He is fast enough. He's not, a 4.35, 4.4. He's, high 4.4s. But man, the dude just gets open, and Bryce Young is going to love that. So I went with Jackson Smith-Njigba at 12 to the Houston Texans.
Yeah, so the Texans would be having a great draft so far. The next up were a set of 3 picks that included actually both of the picks that were flipped in the first round in the Aaron Rodgers trade. Matt had actually picked these 3 players. We reversed them because I could see it falling this way. Packers, they have a lot of needs at skill position on offense, but they hardly ever have taken a big first round player there. So he goes with Myles Murphy, the edge there. That does make some sense to the way the Packers have seemingly built their team through the draft. The Patriots at 14, wide receiver is still a big need, even though they upgraded with Juju Smith-Schuster. Matt, very high on Quentin Johnson, and his potential takes him there at 14. And then the Jets, one of their needs is offensive line, especially when you have an older quarterback like Rodgers. You're going to want to protect him. So they get the tackle Broderick Jones. Dennis, any thoughts on those 3 picks?
Nothing says don't draft in your rookie drafts like the Patriots drafting Quentin Johnson, man. They just can't draft wide receivers. It's like a harbinger of death for Quentin Johnson's fantasy value. He's got some work to do. I don't know. I'm a little concerned. Taking him that high is a huge projection. So I don't know. I like Murphy. I like Broderick Jones. I think Jones is a great pick for the Jets. They need, in listening to Howard Bender, he had, I forget the guy he had on covers the Jets. But the Jets started, including Mekhi Becton in preseason before he got injured, the Jets started 8 different offensive tackles last year. So adding a new young stud offensive tackle is a beautiful move there.
So next up was my 3. I start with the Washington Commanders. They have some needs. They're a team where if one of those 4 quarterbacks was on the board, you might think perhaps they take a shot. Nobody is. I think they're another team that really likes to load up on defense. Devin Witherspoon, I take him as a corner to kind of bolster that secondary. They've had some defensive issues the last couple seasons for Washington. I'm sure Rivera wants another piece. Biggest probably glaring need for the Steelers at 17 is offensive line. They have a lot of good young skill position players. They got their quarterback of the future last year, so I went Darnell Wright, an offensive tackle. And then I'm sure you didn't like this one, but Detroit Lions at 18, they fell to me. I was thinking, where are their needs? I was partially tempted. A lot of people think that their 2 biggest areas are corner and tight end when you're reading about draft needs. I didn't feel like it was a great value of corners there, and I think they've also picked up some veteran pieces this offseason. with the recent suspension there of Jamison Williams, meaning they won't have him for the first 6 games, they haven't really found any kind of replacement at tight end, nor have they drafted one. So I went with Dalton Kincaid, who I think we've talked about being maybe a little bit more of a complete player than Michael Mayer, who's probably more of an offensive specialist. So, Dennis, I'm prepared to be roasted.
As much as I like Dalton Kincaid, the Lions are kind of an 11 personnel team. And so that means that Kincaid their tight end needs to be a two-way guy. And, after their tight end scored 9 touchdowns last year after they traded away TJ Hawkinson. Kincaid's probably a better receiver than all the tight ends they have. I just feel like any number of defensive players would have been a better pick for me, just because they have so much work to do on defense. Like, they can score points. They showed last year they can score points. So I love the pick of Darnell Wright to Pittsburgh. Kenny Pickett is not going to be, a guy that is vying for the QB1 in fantasy football, but he can be a QB1 if he gets the right stuff around him. And a lot of that is offensive line, and they've really needed to bolster that offensive line. So I dig the pick of Darnell Wright. They've got Najee Harris will like that. Jaylen Warren will like that. With Freiermuth Pickens, Deontay Johnson, and Allen Robinson, they've got some weapons. You just need to protect Kenny Pickett. And then Witherspoon, Washington, what was it, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when they brought Chase Young in, that defense was expected to take off. On paper, it looked like it was going to be dominant, and it has just flopped on its face. The fact that Rivera is still keeping his job, being a defensive guy after that's been such a problem the last few seasons, is quite a testament to his perseverance. So I like the pick of Witherspoon.
All right, we're going to move to our next set of picks. And Dennis, the first one up is you with Tampa Bay.
The Buccaneers have several issues this offseason. They're a team that, whether they want to admit it or not, is in rebuild. When you have Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask competing to be your quarterback, I'm surprised Mike Evans and Chris Godwin both aren't demanding trades, but we haven't heard squat out of either of them. Their biggest issue going back to last year was they lost all of their interior line. They lost Jensen to injury. Both of their guards moved on in free agency. So I went ahead and drafted Osiris Torrance, the big guard out of Florida. Him and John Michael Schmitz are probably the two best interior guys at their respective positions. But with Ryan Jensen back and getting healthy, I felt like going guard what was the way to go here for Tampa Bay. The Seattle Seahawks, this would have been a beautiful spot for them to draft Hendon Hooker. He had a precipitous fall since Seattle took Richardson at 6 or 5, but Seattle needed edge, defensive line, wide receiver. They have several needs. I went ahead and took Lucas Van Ness, the edge out of Iowa. A lot of people squawk about, he couldn't even start on his own team, and that was a Kirk Ferentz thing. Ferentz starts the seniors, and they had a senior. There's a reason that Van Ness won't start for Iowa next year. It's because he's good enough to go to the NFL. Van Ness played more snaps, was more productive than the senior starter that played in front of him. I think Van Ness is going to be an excellent player for the Seahawks, likely to step right in and be a starter. And then for the Chargers, they need some young wide receivers to get ready for Keenan Allen to continue getting old. Mike Williams, DeAndre Carter moved on. They do have Josh Palmer still. Austin Eckler's in the last year of his contract, and they basically said, look, man, we're not going to re-sign you. Gerald Everett's, that, veteran tight end. They need help on offense, but they also, I don't know that there was any offensive. I don't like the receivers for the rest of this first round. They're all these little guys, unless you reach into probably for a second round player that's a little bit bigger. So for me, I went with cornerback Deonte Banks. I think he brings a lot to the table. Great cover guy. I think he's going to fit right in and start right out of the gate there in Los Angeles.
So next up, Matt had Baltimore, probably a team that is in constant need of receivers and some offensive help. Also have questions at quarterback, but it does seem in keeping with the way they've run their team. Matt takes edge Will McDonald, the fourth for them. They do like to get some pass rushers. Minnesota at 24. They gave up on Adam Thielen this year. A lot of, is KJ Osborne going to be the number 2? Matt doesn't think so. Takes Jordan Addison here, one of the top-rated receivers. Wouldn't be a bad landing spot to have somebody to pair with Justin Jefferson. And then the Jaguars, an ascending team, just need to keep building and filling in the pieces, getting Derek Hall, the edge player there. So I think you mentioned, Dennis, you're not wild about the receiver options we have left, but what do you think about these 3 picks?
Yeah, McDonald and Hall, 2 teams that need help on defense. The Ravens, their defense got old last year, and we saw now it wouldn't have mattered much for them with Lamar Jackson missing so much time and Rashad Bateman missing so much time. Derek Hall to Jacksonville, the Jaguars are rising, and right now they've got a few positions that they've got studs at. Everywhere else, they need to take the best player available, and grabbing Derek Hall and slotting him in at the edge position is going to be great. I like Jordan Addison. Of these wide receivers, I do like him a little bit more than Josh Downs and Zay Flowers. Those other, Addison, and honestly, it's because Addison's just a little bit taller. He's every bit as light as they are, but in the short and light box, Addison only checks one of them. I think any of them, Flowers, Addison, McDonald, teams are going to be drafting them here in the late first round, and it's from a fantasy perspective. It's going to be a little bit of a challenge for me to want to go up and draft these guys in the mid to late first round.
So then I took over, and I'm just going to be honest. Maybe this is just a little bit. I felt like some of these are wild card teams in terms of need. The Giants, I think they need some kind of playmakers to put, around their young quarterback. So I went with grabbing Zay Flowers, their wide receiver, with their pick at 26. With Dallas, I wrestled a little bit. I think there is certainly a possibility they take a running back there, but I ended up, it feels like they, for the time being, at least solved the wide receiver issue a little bit with the trading for Brandon Cooks. I'm not as convinced that they like their tight end options as other people. I think they just couldn't come to a deal that they liked financially with Dalton Schultz with all their other commitments. So I took Michael Mayer, and then Buffalo is probably going to draft like a defensive tackle or something, but if they were smart and they wanted to stay in the Super Bowl window, I still maintain they need to get some kind of help and some kind of relief for Josh Allen. So I just went ahead and pulled the trigger for Bijan Robinson. I don't think that they've done much to substantively improve their backfield. Damian Harris, to me, is a great depth player. They haven't done anything really to improve an offense that showed like it was flagging at times. I don't know that they can continue to be a serious contender, putting everything on Josh Allen all the time. I think they need to pair him with somebody. There's a reason they were rumored to be making overtures to trying to sign Saquon Barkley or to trying to trade for Dalvin Cook. I think they realize they need some kind of powerhouse option back there. I think if he falls to them, they will snap him up.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think to me that seems like a luxury pick for them. You know, I probably like Damian Harris a little bit better than you do. I think Buffalo they're a pass first team, and they only need a big running back to do a few things, and I think Damian Harris is going to be able to do that. But I mean, I get it. Bijan had to go somewhere. I really thought he was going to get picked to the Cowboys, but you know it's hard. But you know, honestly, is Bijan Robinson a better prospect than Jonathan Taylor was coming into the NFL? In your opinion?
I don't know. He seems to be more highly regarded. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the only reason was because Wisconsin didn't throw the ball to Taylor very much versus Texas threw the ball more to Bijan Robinson. I think Taylor was a better prospect coming in, and he lasted into the second round. So I'm not going to be surprised if Robinson falls into the second round. But I get it. He had to go somewhere. I like the Mayer pick, though I am kind of high on Jake Ferguson. I do think that he played really well when he got pushed into having to be the starter. So I did like that. You know, and Flowers, I get it. I think if the Giants, though, go wide receiver, it feels like why would they take Flowers, who is Sterling Shepard, who is who are Jamison Crowder, who is Paris Campbell, who is whatever. They've got like 9 slot guys, and so I don't know that that's necessarily the right fit nor the best player available that suits the Giants. But I mean, we're in the end of the first round, and it's things. We've only had one trade projected, so it's going to be if we get the back half of the first, if we get 3 picks right, I'm going to consider it a win.
So you were up next with the Bengals and the Saints.
So the Bengals lost both of their starting safeties this offseason. Dax Hill, who's mostly played slot for them, is one of the current starting safeties in Cincinnati. I went ahead and drafted Brian Branch. I think he's regarded as, the best or one of the best safeties coming out this year. I know there's another guy some people maybe like a little bit better. But I went ahead and drafted Brian Branch here at the 29th pick. And then the New Orleans Saints, they have needs. They let Marcus Davenport walk in free agency. They need defensive line, edge, wide receiver, tight end. They've got some guys that, are kind of depth players that are getting probably more opportunity than they'd like to give them there on the offensive side. But I went ahead and drafted Nolan Smith, the edge. I believe he was out of Georgia. They need somebody as Cam Jordan, enters his twilight. He's still super productive. They need somebody to apply some pressure off the edge. Pete Warner came on at the linebacker position last year. They've got some good linebackers, and I think adding Nolan Smith, a guy who knows how to win coming out of Georgia, I think that's a great addition.
To close out the first round, Matt goes with Felix. Is it Anduki Uzama? Anudike Uzama, the edge to the Eagles, continuing that rebuild of the defense for the Eagles. And then, Kansas City has looked potentially at wide receivers. They let a couple of guys go. Matt takes Jalen Hyatt for them. Well, what do you think about that fit?
Yeah, I'm not as high on Hyatt as I think he struggle with press coverage in the NFL. He's 6 foot, but only 177 pounds. And he didn't have to face press coverage at all in college because of that offense they ran. So he's going to need to really, really work hard to perfect some releases off the line. It's hard not to like a receiver that goes to Kansas City. And if he goes to Kansas City in the first round, I think he's going to get a draft capital bump in his dynasty stock. That's for sure.
Yeah, and they sometimes like super speed guys, and if anybody had a team where they might be able to shield him off the line like he was getting in college, it might be Kansas City. That'll take us down to the second round, so we'll go. And I kicked off the second round. Pittsburgh, get a tackle up there in the first round. They went and got Patrick Peterson, and they've done some veterans on defense, but I went ahead and got them Cam Smith a corner. I feel like they still are looking at building up and fixing some on the defense. Houston Texans, they've had a pretty good draft, went super offense with the 2 picks we gave them in the first round. Here I look toward building the defense, getting them a big piece in the middle in Brian Brees, the defensive lineman. And then Arizona seemingly has quite a few needs too, could go in a lot of different directions. But I think for a long time, they've lacked stability at the running back position. I don't think James Conner is a great long-term answer. And with Kyler Murray both convalescing and, needing to reduce some of the load on him, I went ahead and took Jahmyr Gibbs, which would give them a pretty big boost in the backfield. So Dennis, what do you think of those 3 picks?
Yeah, I love Cam Smith to Pittsburgh. They need to keep building that defense and keep it up to speed. They've got a good pass rush with Hayward and TJ Watt. So getting a cover corner over there is a nice addition. It wouldn't surprise me if Houston goes defense with the 12th pick. If they go defense with the 2nd pick, or they trade out of it and then go defense, they just hired a defensive-centric head coach. And so I don't know that that's going to be a surprise to anybody if that happens. But they really need a quarterback. They need to say, look, we're done. We've bottomed. We're going to turn it around starting now with the cornerback. Bringing in Brian Brees as a defensive tackle, he should be able to step right in and be the starter there. I like that move a lot. Gibbs is an interesting one. I think that he would probably play in tandem with Conner. And I agree, Conner isn't the future of the running back position. He's been solid. He does have an injury history, but it would allow them to use Gibbs in a manner that maybe suits him. Gibbs isn't great at interior running. He's outstanding on the edges. He's an outstanding pass receiver. We don't know for sure when Kyler's going to be back, and Colt McCoy having to hold it down for 4, 6, 8, 10 games. Who knows? It feels like Gibbs is a guy there that kind of helps get that offense moving in the right direction.
I feel like the best season they had with Conner was when he was paired with Chase Edmonds, who's kind of doing his thing. I think they might benefit a little bit from that tandem.
Yeah.
Dennis, you were next up, taking off with the Colts. So why don't you go through your picks?
So the Colts, we saw them go Will Levis in the first round, and the Colts have struggled at quarterback the last few years. They've had a bevy of veterans, then they ended up starting Sam Ehlinger for a bit last year. They added Will Levis in the first. They have Gardner Minshew coming over. He's going to be the scholar that teaches whoever the rookie is. And in this mock, it's Levis. Teaches them that offense that Shane Steichen is bringing over. But one of the things that's happened there is, 4 or 5 seasons ago, everybody, the Colts were widely regarded as having one of the best offensive lines in the game. And their offensive line, through injuries and age, has just kind of fell apart. I went offensive tackle Anton Harrison for Indianapolis here at the 204. I think they need to bolster the O-line, get a couple more players in there and rebuild that line. For the rookie quarterback, they've got Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman Jr., a couple viable young tight ends, a couple viable old tight ends. They just have to decide who the tight end is going to be. And then Jonathan Taylor. So offensive line is really their biggest need on offense, that and quarterback. At the 205, I went did I draft Anaduki Uzoma?
Oh.
I drafted him again.
Apparently. A guy who's so good to get drafted twice.
Well, we got BJ Ojulari who didn't get drafted. So I'm taking BJ Ojulari there for the Rams. They need to boost their edge. Ojulari is a solid guy, coming out of LSU. He's played in a big-time program, plays a lot like his brother in Aziz in New York. So he's going to add some juice to that defensive line. Well, that's a defensive line that's going to be. Aaron Donald is he hasn't retired, but he's going to go out as a great player when he does go. And then for Seattle, went with John Michael Schmetter. Where did he? One of the best centers, if not the best center, coming out in this class. The Seahawks need interior offensive line help. They drafted tackle Charles Cross, I think it was, a couple seasons ago. Adding John Michael Schmitz to replace an undrafted free agent that they have playing center right now, to me is going to be just the way to go.
So Matt was next, following you. He takes Isaiah Foskey at edge for the Raiders, kind of continuing that trend of building up the defense. They have a pretty solid set of receivers, and they have Josh Jacobs back there behind Jimmy G, so it makes some sense. Carolina Panthers getting a wide receiver in the second round, kind of following the trend that we did with Houston with their second pick, following up getting a quarterback with a young weapon. Josh Downs comes, the receiver out of, I believe, North Carolina. It was his pick there. And then, is it Kalijah Cansey? Kalijah Cansey. Sometimes I can't remember. For the New Orleans Saints there at 9. So any thoughts on those three picks?
The Raiders need to keep adding defense. They need to they need offensive line, they need defense. They need to have a plan for quarterback. They've got Devontae. I don't know what their plan is at tight end long term. Folks see makes sense. He's a good defensive lineman. Josh Downs to Carolina. He's going to be a good slot receiver, and occasionally he'll win downfield. Another small guy, though, 5'9", 5'10", 180 pounds. I don't think he's not quite a direct replacement for DJ Moore, but I think he could be successful. They're still going to need to bring in a typical alpha receiver there. And Kalijah Cansey, I almost went with Cansey when I drafted the edge rusher for the Rams, because he's like the next Aaron Donald. He's short, stocky, quick, strong, went to Pitt. Like, he plays the same style as Aaron Donald, and I was really tempted to bring him into the Rams as a successor, but I ended up passing. I think he's pairing Cansey up with Nolan Smith on the edge is going to help bolster that defensive line there in New Orleans.
All right, so we advance down to our next set, and I hate to tell you, but you and Matt think alike, because I think you were wrong about BJ Ojulari. Let me see. So I was up next with the Tennessee Titans. I considered whether they would take, because Tennessee was a team that we thought might want a quarterback. I pondered taking Hendon Hooker there, but just not sure. A lot of the different mock drafts have had them moving up to get a Richardson or to get a Levis. It didn't make sense where it fell to them in the first round. Maybe it makes sense here. I just didn't go for that. They certainly have got to do something at receiver. If you've seen their receiving numbers from 2022, their best receiver was Robert Woods, and I'm going to say best in quotes, and he's now with the Texans. They've got to do something. So I went with Cedric Tillman there. I had already projected a Green Bay Packers trade. I think they're another team that's got to do something. They lost a lot of receivers. Their only real three receivers of note are the three that they took in the draft last year. So I took Marvin Mims to try to add something to their group. And then the Jets, I had originally thought the Jets might actually end up trading both these picks. They don't. Interior offensive line is a need position for them. I went with Steve Avila, the guard. Any thoughts there?
I love the pick of Steve Avila, pairing him with Broderick Jones, and they've got they drafted a tackle, and then Elijah Vera Tucker, who they drafted last year. That's probably going to give Aaron Rodgers one of the best O-lines he's had in the last few years and provide him with some security there. So I really like that pick. Marvin Mims, well, I like the player, and again, he's another one of these guys that only checks one of those deficiency boxes because he is 5'11", but he's only 177. He's a little bit of a deep threat guy, and I feel like the Packers needed to add somebody whose skills complemented what Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson did. And I think Mims kind of duplicates their skill sets a little more than I would have liked there. But I do like Mims. I think he's a good receiver, and I think he's going to be productive. Whether he can be the 1B or the 2 to Christian Watson and take over that spot. We saw Romeo Doubs produce last year when given opportunity. So it'll be exciting to see what happens with that Packers offense if they, because they're going young in this scenario. They, that with Mims, Watson, Doubs, Samori Toure, and Jordan Love, it's going to be fun to watch. And then Tillman, I like Tillman over Jalen Hyatt. I think he's the better wide receiver. Pairing him up with Treylon Burks, they're still going to need a slot guy, and they got a guy last year, Kyle Phillips is there, so Phillips can kind of step in and be that slot guy, play that Hunter Renfrow, Cole Beasley kind of role. So I like the pick of Tillman.
That brings us up to your next group, kicking off with the Falcons.
The Falcons, in my eyes, I think they need to keep building their defense. I had them going edge in the first round with you had them go edge in the first round with Tyree Wilson. I went ahead and drafted Mazie Smith, the interior defensive lineman out of Michigan. I think he's going to bring some. He'll be able to slide in there with Grady Jarrett, be one of those big interior rotation guys, provide some pressure from the inside. So I like the Mazie Smith pick there. And then the Packers were back on the clock again, and I grabbed Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback. They've got one really, really good guy in Jair Alexander. The last year or so, Rasul Douglas has been playing well, but there's a reason Rasul Douglas is as well traveled as he is, and that's lack of consistency. So going ahead and bringing in Emmanuel Forbes, helping to bolster that secondary. And then at the 15th pick in the second round, the Patriots interior offensive lineman. But this guy is, like, to me, the most Patriots pick, I think, in this NFL draft, and that's Cody Mauch. He's listed it. He played tackle in college, but in the draft preparation stuff and in the Senior Bowl, he's done a lot of work at guard. He's done work at center. He can pretty much play anywhere across the offensive line, and that's the kind of guy Bill Belichick loves. Belichick says, I'm going to take this guy that can play anywhere, and he's going to, if he's one of my best 5, he's going to be on there, and I know he can be, whether it's at left tackle, right guard, center. I think Cody Mauch ends up stepping into the Patriots offensive line and being a starter from day one.
Next up was Matt. He had the Commanders. He takes a corner, second round in a row. Keely Ringo could make sense for them trying to rebuild that defense. We've talked about that being a need. Then he had your Lions at 17, took BJ Ojulari for them. So I guess the question is, would you prefer him with Detroit? And then Pittsburgh gets Julius Brents, another cornerback. I had taken one to start the round, but it makes sense. Pittsburgh, another team trying to keep that defense strong.
To me, I think I might want to go like with Siaki Ika for Detroit, another interior lineman. Another guy that I liked. Where did he go? Maybe he's not on my list here. There was the linebacker out of Iowa, Jack Campbell. Big, fast. I don't know if he's got the greatest instincts. Oh no, Campbell went to Miami already, or after that. But that might have been a decent pick. But I could have seen them also maybe going Julius Brents in Detroit. That would be a decent pick. They need, again, cornerback help. Let's see, did they go cornerback in the first? No, they did Jalen Carter there.
Yep.
Carter and Dalton Kincaid. Okay. So, yeah, going cornerback there maybe makes sense after trading away Jeff Okudah in a flop. So that kind of makes a little bit of sense. Keely Ringo, I think that, he's a bigger cornerback. He kind of faded a little bit for a little while. He was like right there at the top. I think he's going to be a good NFL cornerback. Then Ojulari and Brent. So I think we've talked a little bit about both of those guys.
So getting close to the final here. So I will take a look. My next up, I had Tampa Bay. It's hard to tell exactly what they're doing. They did not get a lot of production out of the running game last year. Some of that was probably the offensive line. They're one of the few teams that looked at Bijan Robinson. We didn't have him going there in the first round. I think they might want more out of their backfield, so I took Jack Charbonnet. Miami, probably a team that you also could make a case they should take a running back. They're the team that did not have a first-round pick because it was taken away in a disciplinary action by the NFL. I think they have a lot of needs on defense as well. I went with Jack Campbell there. And Seattle continuing building that line, especially if you're going to have a player like Richardson. They have Ken Walker back there. I get them a tackle in Matthew Bergeron. And then, Dennis, you were up. You filled in for Matt here a lot down the stretch. Do you want to go through some of your picks?
Yeah, I went ahead and grabbed the defensive lineman, Adetomiwa Adebawore out of Northwestern.
Sounded perfect.
For the Bears. The Bears, I'm a believer you build a team from the inside out. So when your defensive line is getting pressure on the quarterback, your defensive backs play better. It's easier for them. So if I remember, I think we took a. Oops, why am I? Oh, I'm not scrolling there like I want to. For the Chargers, I went ahead and grabbed. They need to replace aging players, skill position players. I went ahead and grabbed Luke Musgrave, tight end out of Oregon State. He's a receiving tight end. He's going to have to work to be a blocker. That may maybe we see him get used kind of in a Mark Andrews kind of role, to be a receiver and not really asked to block. That would be a best case scenario for him. And then finally, I went ahead and I took Hendon Hooker to the Detroit Lions. Honestly, I just kind of looked to see what was left and was there any place else he could go? And there really wasn't. Somebody would have had to trade up from the third to grab Hooker. And I felt like that was far enough for him to slide. He can go into Detroit. He can sit behind Jared Goff for a year and a half. He can get fully healthy. I recognize that he's older. He's 25 years old, which means he's only potentially going to have a 10-year career. Oh, my bad. But he's got a great arm. He's great with mobility. He can run well. He can do a lot of the things that you want out of the quarterback position. I've seen several analysts that actually have him ranked over Will Levis. And if he hadn't gotten injured last year, he may be the QB3 in this class. So I went ahead and grabbed Hendon Hooker to the Lions. Jaguars continuing to build the defense. I grabbed the safety Antonio Johnson out of I don't remember if it's Texas or Texas A&M, but they need to add some ammunition to the back end of their defense. For the Giants, I went ahead and grabbed Trenton Simpson, linebacker out of Clemson. Fast guy, can play. He's used to winning. He brings a winning culture. I think that's the kind of guys that Brian Daboll wants to add to the team. And then for the Cowboys, I reached down the draft board. I don't know if he's going to go in the second round, but I went with DeJuan Jones, the right tackle out of Ohio State. And just to be clear, he is a right tackle. He's not going to play left tackle. At 6'8" and 375 pounds on a diet day, DeJuan Jones is a right tackle. He's tough to get around. He's got to beat out street free agent Terrence Steele, and I think he'll be able to do that. Steele drops down to the interior offensive line for the Cowboys, provides them some depth there. And Tyler Smith on the left side and DeJuan Jones on the right side over the short. But I liked
Then I had the Bills. I made a joke about them usually taking a defensive tackle. Oh, by the way, I did look it up. Antonio Johnson, Texas A&M. You were correct. Buffalo Bills taking a defensive tackle. That is still kind of listed as a need for them. I went with Keanu Breton here at the end of the second, giving them kind of that defensive tackle. Cincinnati, there's been a lot of talk that they're going to look at tight end. Hayden Hurst worked really well for them last year. They let him go. They took a shot on Irv Smith. Is that going to pan out? It's a 1-year deal for them. Hard to know what they're thinking. So I went ahead and took Darnell Washington down here. I thought it was not a bad spot, not a bad shot at a position that they may be interested in getting. And then Dennis, you if you have any thoughts on that, and then you have 3 more to close it out here.
I like the Washington pick. Cincinnati uses their tight ends game plan specific. So I think Washington is going to have to become a better route runner in the NFL. A lot of his stuff was just sort of that I'm blocking, I'm releasing down the center of the field. I'm bigger than everybody else, so throw it my direction, Stetson. But he did show some athleticism at the combine. So I think he'll be a real good two-way tight end. And if they can work out a way to extend T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, I think that offense, that's where that offense is centered. Chicago Bears back on the board. We're going to keep helping out Justin Fields and the team there. I went ahead and grabbed Joe Tippmann at center. Again, the Bears are starting a street free agent at center, college free agent guy, upgrade at center, Joe Tippmann out of Wisconsin, another in the long line of Wisconsin offensive linemen. And then at 31, I was torn. A lot of people are high on guys like Devin Achane. I personally really like Tank Bigsby. But in the end, I was like, well, what does Philadelphia need? How do they use their running backs? And I ended up going with Roschon Johnson, who is one of the bigger backs in this class. He'll be able to slide right in there in that same that Miles Sanders had. He's got good vision. He plays the game well. He understands it. He may be able to expand the role because he is a good pass catcher. And after playing most of his high school and some early college at quarterback, he does understand the passing game concepts. And so he could fundamentally end up being a 3-down back in Philadelphia. Pour one out for my boy Rashad Penny. And then I closed out the draft at 32 with tackle Blake Freeland. Kansas City let both of their offensive tackles go last season. They signed a free agent at left tackle. Freeland is a former tight end. He'll be able to step right in on the right side of that offensive line. I think we're at a point with Kansas City where, because Patrick Mahomes, and granted, his contract is going to start looking like a bargain here anytime. But they're gonna kind of cycle through younger offensive linemen. And when you're winning a lot, taking younger offensive linemen at the end of the first, end of the second, and getting good players there like that, it just kind of keeps the winning going. So I went with tackle Blake Freeland.
Well, that'll bring us to a conclusion of the 2 rounds. We will know how close we came to being correct by Friday night. First round there on Thursday night. But you know what I take away from this? I'm very excited on Friday night to see 2 NFL teams draft BJ Ojulari, because I feel like that's what's going to happen. It's going to be the first time ever we just knew it was coming, that we could be prepared for that. So when it happens, think of us. Think of us fondly.
Fondly.
We will not be on a regular slot on Friday. Dennis has some fun plans for himself. But Matt, possibly, but definitely myself and some of the others from the Campus Canton crew will be live for portions of opening night of the draft on Thursday, and certainly for portions of the draft on Friday night. So you can find that on the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. We'll be there. If you were not with us last year when we went live on Friday, we had a Patriots fan and got to see that Tyquan Thornton reaction live, and trust me, these are the kind of things you just don't want to miss. But Dennis, if people have some time between these 10-minute clocks on Thursday night, what can they do?
Oh, they can download and listen to our show, or just download, subscribe, give us a rating and a review. We love that stuff.
Well, Dennis and I will be back next Monday, licking our wounds after looking at our 2-round mock draft and discussing all the fantasy implications of what's bound to be one of the best spring football weekends of the year. Draft season is here.
What's your over/under on draft trades?
I was thinking about that.
Let's say first-round draft trades.
Last year, wasn't last year when we had AJ Brown move and then Marquise Brown and that. Yep. So there was 3 or 4. There probably will be a couple. I still think it's possible, especially if, so let's say Carolina takes Bryce Young and Houston truly doesn't take a quarterback. I think somebody will jump into Arizona's spot, and I think somebody else is going to try to come up. I think it's going to be quarterback related, and I think it really depends on those first 2 picks, how many trades we get, but I'm going to say 2.
Yeah, I was going to say 2. If the over/under is 2.5, I'm going to take the under.
Yeah,
including trades that have already been made. So,
well, until then, remember, and you have a couple of days to get in that Kevin Costner Classic Draft Day just to get you ready.
Never saw it.
Well, that's why I said you have 2 days to get it